Welcome to Eternity Archives, a podcast by Eternity College for students, alumni, faculty, and friends. I'm Ernesto Duke, Eternity's president and the host of this podcast. At Eternity, we have students, alumni, and faculty living all around the world, living for the kingdom of Jesus. One of the most beautiful things about Eternity is how our diverse community, representing different countries, cultures, and backgrounds, comes together to study and be transformed by the scriptures. In this podcast, we hope to share the amazing story of Jesus' people in God's kingdom around the world at Eternity College. This is Eternity Archives. Hello, everybody. Thank you for listening to Eternity Archives or watching whatever way that you're enjoying this episode. I am here with Matt Moore, who's one of our professors. Matt, thanks for being on the show. It would be super helpful if you could start by just telling us a little bit about yourself, your history with the school, your ministry situation, anything like that you'd like to share.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, Ernesto. So I've been married to my wife, Sarah, for 21 years, and we have 3 kids, Seth, Silas, and Blythe. They're 18, 15, and 13. My connection to the Bible College is I was living in Simi Valley, working at Cornerstone Simi when the Bible College started. And then shortly after it started, I graduated from seminary and started teaching there. And was teaching on campus, doing some of the New Testament books, pastoral epistles, John, and Revelation, and even the theology courses under the old curriculum. And so did that for several years in person. And then when we moved down to South LA, and then now up here to Sacramento, been continuing to teach remotely online, and I've loved it.
Wonderful. Yeah, I'd like to I know a little bit about your story, but it'd be helpful for people to hear what instigated that move from Simi Valley, which for those who don't know is like it's a suburb of LA. Is that what it's called? Suburb? Yeah. It's a suburb of LA, upper middle class neighborhood. And then you moved to South LA to plant a church in more of like a city center, urban environment. What triggered that for you, and what was that experience like? And then you can talk about moving to Sacramento from there too.
Yeah. So in 2004, we got to see me in 2003. In 2004, my wife and I took a perspectives class, and it was pretty life-changing, where it opened our eyes to God's heart for the nations. And so we started praying about that, if God would lead us overseas, and we checked out different opportunities around the world. And at the same time, God was just opening our heart to what was going on in the city centers through a church plant of Cornerstone Living Stones. It's actually your church.
Yeah.
And so the pastor there, he began just encouraging me in the word, showing me God's heart for, different ethnicities, different people from different social classes. And so all of that was kind of coming together, God's heart for the nations, God's heart for different people. And we're like, well, where should we pray about going? Let's look at our own backyard. Let's look down the freeway at South LA. And so we then drove down there and started praying about it, and God opened up some doors at an elementary school where our kids could go and where we started the ministry. And so it was quite a journey. It was a hard journey, but extremely fulfilling and rewarding. So that was about 12 years ago that we moved to LA.
And how long were you guys in South LA?
We were in South LA for 3 years, and it was hard. It was very undoing for me, very humbling, and at times humiliating. And I think I went through a season of depression, and it was just different serving the Lord down there with people that were so broken. And I think I was used to doing discipleship that was very one-dimensional, where it's like you meet with somebody, they're struggling, and after 4 or 6 weeks in the Word with them, they were kind of back on the right track. But in LA, it was after 4 or 6 weeks, you're barely getting to know them. And as you learned more about them, just the generational sin and the brokenness and the poverty mindset and the different pressures that they were experiencing socially and economically, discipleship took on a whole new look. And rather than trying to fix people, just aim to love people. And sometimes the outcomes weren't what I hoped, but I didn't regret it because I was aiming to love them.
Yeah. Yeah. And you, so then you were in LA and then, I guess theoretically you had an opportunity to go back to larger church,
Yeah.
suburban church style after those 3.5, 4 years or so, but you chose to move
Mhm.
to Sacramento and do something very similar. Um,
Yep.
what was it that convinced you? I mean, and not you're not projecting this on everybody, but for you and your family, what was it that convinced you that even though this was the hardest 3, 4 years of ministry of your life, that you were going to go into a similar environment just in another city?
Yeah, it was hard to get around what I saw biblically
Mm,
for God's call on our life. Not that it couldn't be done in the suburbs. It's just I think if my wife and I went to the suburbs, I think at least for us, we'd forget about it because we wouldn't see it maybe as much. And so for us, we found that the city center was a great place for us to serve. And again, it's not for
mm.
everybody.
Yeah, yeah.
And my wife also came alive in ministry. She loved the front porch style ministry where people just showed up uninvited.
Mm,
And so we wanted that context. And um, yeah, and when I said we couldn't get away from what we saw biblically, it's just like it was jumping out in scripture, like everywhere.
mm,
Romans 2, Ephesians 2, Galatians 2, James 2. They talk about this multi-ethnic reality, this multi-class, diverse reality where the rich and the poor are friends. It's not the rich serving the poor, but they're in fellowship with one another. And
mm.
people from different walks of life and backgrounds are doing life, living as family. And so we wanted that, and we found that the city center was a great place for that to take place. Not that it couldn't take place elsewhere, but um, it was the place that we found that we thrived. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean the whole like multi-ethnic or like wanting diverse church has obviously been more and more popular in the last, I don't know, 10 years or so, would you say? And people because of the church that I'm a part of, which also has similar values and, strives towards that, friends of mine who are maybe part of suburban churches or rural churches or different places have asked, like, well, like, how do we do that? And how do we get that? And how do we get different groups? And I was like, I don't know. You chose the hard way. Like, you chose to go places where there's so much separation between classes or between ethnicities or races or whatever it might be. Or, places like Boise as an example, like where there aren't a lot of different types or different languages and cultures and things represented. It's almost like you and I have chosen the easy way to have a multi-ethnic church, or the easier way. I don't know that
Mhm.
it's not easy. Yeah, it brings so many
Yeah,
different complications and traditions and things,
yeah,
but yeah, yeah. Well,
yeah.
yeah. What do you how do you feel like and this I'm not meaning to put you on the spot, but how do you feel like your training in seminary either prepared you or ill prepared you for um urban church planning, multi-ethnic city church planning, or just pastoring? I mean, now you've been there for a while. I don't know if you're still a plant by whatever definitions, but
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, we kind of consider ourselves a plant still, but I think the seminary prepared me for just a love for the word and the authority of the word.
Mm,
Because it's the word that it wasn't what was trending socially that caused us
right.
to do this. I mean, we would quit. Well, put it this way, I would quit if it was a social movement in my heart. It was
Mm,
the word that led us to South LA, and then caused us to stay in the city center, but now here in Sacramento. Just when I saw God's heart for it, and so seminary gave me that, just the
yeah.
authority of the word, that we got to live by this book, and different people are called to different things in this book, but all of us are called to obey it, and so I think when people are some people are like, well, I don't know if I'm called to a diverse church. Well, I would hope, though, that our churches would reflect our community
Mm,
at least. But I would say sometimes our communities are built around the wrong things. Like sometimes a
Mm,
gated community is built around the people that are the haves, not the have-nots. But
mm,
if you look closely in most communities, you're going to find diversity. I was meeting with some elders at a church not too long ago, and they're like, "Well, there's no diversity in this town." I'm like, let's like who are the people that work in some of the shops and maybe come to fix things in your home, or like maybe they're all the same ethnicity but different social class, and you have them in this church. No,
mm.
so why aren't you even friends with them? And so I think sometimes we just need to open our eyes wider to see who really is in our community, um, and seek to be friends with them. So
Yeah. Yeah, McDonald's used to be the telltale place. I think it's kind of died now, but you used to
hmm,
be able to go to
yeah,
McDonald's
yeah,
and see, if
yeah.
you want to really know what your community looks like, just go to McDonald's and hang out for a couple hours. And but
Hmm,
now I
yeah.
feel like a lot of people don't, but maybe Starbucks, now Starbucks is the new place or whatever it is. There's some city
Parks,
center
parks.
for you guys. Yeah, yeah,
I
for
found
parks.
parks. That's where, I mean, I realized how many Afghan refugees now are in our neighborhood just by going to the parks.
Right.
It seems to bring, I mean, a lot of times the haves are walking their dogs and the
Uh-huh.
have-nots are having barbecues in the parks, at
Mm,
least in our area. And again, it just opened my eyes to, wow, this community is changing. And are we really trying to reach those that are actually here? Or are we trying to reach the community that was versus the community that
uh,
is? And so it's been eye
where
opening.
where was it in the Middle East that you guys were considering? Was it Afghanistan or was it Iraq? Can't
Iraq,
remember. Oh,
Iraq.
Iraq. Oh,
Yeah,
gotcha.
we went and checked out northern Iraq.
Mm,
That's kind of looked like God was maybe calling us there. And then um, after some conversations with the elders at Cornerstone, it seemed like, nah, maybe this is not the best place.
mm,
So,
gotcha. Gotcha.
yeah.
Well, another aspect of your life is that you are the senior archbishop of the EFCA. Isn't that true?
Yeah, that is the
Yeah.
title that I prefer.
No, what is your real title?
Superintendent
Oh,
of a district. So the EFCA has like 17 districts around the United States. And so our district, which is the Western District, it's Northern California and most of Nevada.
oh,
So
okay.
it's about 50 churches that I encourage the pastors and oversee them.
And what is that like 50 churches? So is that like you're hitting one a week or how do you pastor a church and then also um do
Yeah,
that? That sounds like a lot.
it can be. I find that pastoring a church helps me be more effective in reaching pastors because I'm not talking historically about pastoral ministry, but very
Mm,
present tense, like, hey, here's the struggles we're having with our elders, or here's a person in the church that is time consuming, or here's the sermon series that we're going through. Um, but basically, the way that I do it is I travel 3 times a year to these different churches, do a
mm,
circuit, get them together. We have these cohorts, and
mm,
anywhere from three to 10 pastors get there together. And honestly, post pandemic, Zoom, it's a lot easier. Pastors are totally cool with just a phone call, a text message, even a
mm,
handwritten card. They feel cared for. And so,
mm.
um, so that's a lot of what I do. And so throughout the day, I'll get text messages or I'll send text messages, and sometimes I'll meet them for coffee. But where I'm at in Sacramento, I can get to most churches
Uh,
within a day. So,
okay.
yeah.
What do you see? Because I know when you were part of like the Cornerstone network of churches, that was like at its max 10 churches or something like that, right? I mean, it was never a big, it wasn't a denomination or anything like that. So what
No.
uh in y'all's church is a EFCA church too?
Mhm.
Yeah. So
Yep.
what how what led you into that, like being a part of a larger denomination, and what do you see that maybe like us smaller, independent, virtually zero connection churches are missing by by not being a part of something bigger like that?
Yeah. Well, I've heard this. This kind of doesn't answer your question, but I'll head towards an answer. I've heard that networks are trying to act more like denominations, and denominations are trying to act more like networks.
Hmm.
They're trying to. So the EFCA, which is a denomination, it is, but it acts very much like a network where everyone's autonomous.
What's it?
And yet the
What
beauty,
what is the difference? What what are the difference between those two?
What's that? A network?
Yeah, what defines a denomination?
A denomination, uh, well, a lot of times it's just more historical. It has, it's been around for, I don't know, several decades, if not a half
Oh, okay.
century. The EFCA started in the 50s and they have like a central structure, even though they don't have authority. So we have a president, we have a vice president, we pay
Mm,
our dues. It's small, 1 or 2% to the denomination. Um, and they have a lot of resources that they provide at the national level for us, for retirement and then human resources and missions
mm,
around the world. So there's a lot of that. The value that I see of a denomination, the reason why we moved towards the EFCA was it had the feel of a network, but it had some history. It also
mm,
had a sound theology that hadn't shifted for 50 years. And
mm.
I've appreciated that. EFCA is known for minoring, like majoring on the majors and minoring on the minors. So like
Right.
we
You
have
guys
this
have like
doctrinal statement.
the ten tenets or something like that.
Yeah, 10 statements that most evangelicals can get behind. And then on secondary issues like men and women's roles, charismatic issues, even end times, we have
Mm,
different views. And so those secondary issues, we choose to live in charity with one another. And so you'll find within the EFCA church, when I go around to these different churches that I oversee, they are so different. Some are
mm,
attractional, some are missional, some are liturgical, some are more house church like.
mm.
Um, and so it's the philosophy of ministry is extremely wide, although the theology, we're all on that same page of those 10 tenets.
Mm.
So I've appreciated that it's not an echo chamber of thought. Um, it's reformed-ish, but there's also people that are not reformed. So, anyways,
Yeah. And then a network is just guys that went to seminary
oh yeah,
together that call themselves a network or what?
they could. So I feel like bigger churches start networks. They plant churches that are very much like theirs, like kind of a family of churches
Mm,
idea. But then they might get big, like Acts 29, or even the Gospel Coalition, and so they'll sometimes pay dues to it. They'll have some semblance of structure, um, but I don't know. The FCA very much acts like a network in that I have no authority over the churches. The president of the EFCA has no authority over the churches. I could
mm,
not fire a pastor if I wanted to. We influence, we have leadership through our influence, but
mm,
not through any given authority, because all the churches are autonomous, independent.
mm.
So,
Cool. Cool.
yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean that there is something very attractive. I think like EBC attracts eternity. We attract like I don't know, vagabond, rogue, like just you're gonna go do your own thing type people. In our past or sorry, in our faculty and in our staff, but definitely from our students. Our students are what's cool is that they're also different and all doing very, very different things. But
Yep.
there's definitely an anti-authority that might come with being an EBC student. Like you don't want to go to some structured place, like you want to be online and have your freedom. But it seemed
Mm,
it maybe it's just getting a little bit older or uh having gaps in ministry and realizing it would be great if there was a bigger thing that could come help fill these gaps and instead they just
yep.
become holes where things people and projects fall through. um
Mhm.
yeah, I could see a ton of benefit in that, whereas before I would have poo-pooed them a little bit. I think just like, "Hey, what are y'all doing? Like you all have to
Mhm.
sign this stupid statement." Or
Mhm.
and they're not even stupid. I could agree with it, but just there's something in me that doesn't even want to sign it if a bunch of people I
Yep.
don't know aren't signing it. Which is a silly immature thing, I guess. Um, yeah.
I wanted older people too. I wanted some history because
Mm,
I was raised Presbyterian, and in college I was Baptist, and then for 12 years or so with Cornerstone, 10 or 12 years, and then with the plant in LA, we were
mm,
non-denominational, and so I wanted something in between the non-denom world and then the top-down denominational world with the
mm,
Presbyterian Church that I experienced, and so I found that in the EFCA. And it's not perfect, but there's a lot of humility. There's a lot of diversity. Even the diversity with thinking, like I've appreciated that it is not an echo chamber and that my thoughts are challenged and we're not all reading the same books and we're not all looking up to the same spiritual heroes.
Yeah.
So I've appreciated that there is a good cross pollination, although we're all in the same ballpark theologically.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, thank you for giving some time to us. We'll go ahead and wrap it up with that, but I really appreciate you being on the show, and we'll see you guys next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of Eternity Archives. If you haven't already, check out Eternity College with 30 plus programs, including advanced bachelor's degrees, dual degrees, associates, and certificates. We're ready to prepare you for whatever it is that God calls you to and wherever it is that He calls you right now. Check out eternity.edu for more information.